Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com. Hey now, today we're going to take a look at the epic card game from White Wizard Games. Now, White Wizard Games really put themselves on the map last year with the advent of their game Star Realms, which has been an extremely popular physical card game, but also a digital card game, but that is a deck building game. This is actually a LCG style card game, and actually it used to be a CCG some years ago, didn't quite take off. This is their re-implementation of that system. It was funded through Kickstarter just like Star Realms was, and it was very, very popular. And the best way I can describe this game before we get into the overview is sort of a faster, more visceral version of Magic the Gathering. You are taking control of a deck full of these different champions, and the creatures and monsters and powerful warriors, and also the types of spells, which in this game are called events, which are going to manipulate the battlefield and get it to your advantage to put out more champions. And the game emphasizes putting out really powerful warriors very quickly and using very powerful spells very quickly. Let me go ahead and show you how the game works. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I'm going to give you a brief overview of the epic card game. Now, I do want to mention up front, the one box of this game, which comes in a small box, as I showed in my intro, can play up to 4 players. Now, a lot of the emphasis of the game is put on deck construction, and also, when you sit down to play the game, having a draft, whether it's your standard draft, or a cube draft, or a sealed tournament, all these different things. There's a lot of like CCG-type rules, even though this isn't a CCG, that you can place on the game, and a lot of emphasis is put on that. That is kind of some of the main modes you should be playing the game in. I'm not going to go over those rules. You can look up that kind of stuff online. I just want to teach you how to play the core game. And when you just bust open the pack for your first game, it's recommended that you just shuffle up all the cards and deal 30 out to each player, then get a feel for the game, and then decide whether or not you want to do deck construction after the fact. So each player will get the 30 cards, you'll draw 5 cards from your deck, and then you're going to begin. Now, the goal of the game is to knock out your opponent's life points. Each player starts off at 30 life points. There is no way to keep track of that out of the box. You have to get a pen and paper or your phone or whatever it might be. Now, in the deck of cards, there are 4 different factions of cards. There's blue, yellow, green, red, blue, yellow, green, and red. And each of them has a different type of focus and different things that they're good at. And they're broken down into champions and events. Champions are creatures, and events are like special magic spells that you can cast. They each have different factions and alignments, and they're what you're going to use in order to take out your opponent. Champions will come out into the field, and they'll be able to attack your opponent and attack their monsters, and or your opponent might block with their champions. And then the events could be used to have random different effects depending on the circumstance. So here's how a turn will go. At the first step of every turn, again, at the beginning of the game, each player is going to have 5 cards. The first step of every turn is that each player is going to get a gold. A gold is your resource in this game, and you automatically get 1 at the start of each player's turn. That means that even if it's not your turn, you gain a gold, and you can actually use that to use some of your events and ambush champions that can be played out of your turn. But primarily it's for use of whoever's turn it actually is. They're going to gain that gold, and if they don't use it by the end of their turn, it goes away. On every turn, except if you are taking the very first turn in the game, you will draw a card from your deck. And then very simply, you can play as many cards as you want as you have currency for, as you actually can. Now up in the top corner, there is the cost of the card. So you see most of the cards, or many of the cards in the game, are just 1 gold. So as long as I've got 1 gold, I can play down that Pyromancer. That's the only card I can cost that costs 1 for the turn. But you may have cards that cost 0. Like a lot of the champions and events will actually have a cost of 0, in which case you can play as many of them as you want. Now, a lot of the cards have different special abilities. I'll cover some of those in a minute. Most champions, when they first come into play, are deploying, quote unquote, which means that they cannot attack or use their powers on their first turn. They just have to sit there kind of inert, although they can still block when it is your opponent's turn. Now, at any point after I've played some champions, as long as I have at least one champion out on the board. Oh, by the way, these are token cards. Token cards, certain things will say put human tokens into play, or put zombies into play, or put demons or wolves and all these different things. Then you just keep those off to the side and you'll use them whenever applicable. If a token dies, it's out of the game. So you're going to keep doing this, playing cards and using powers if you can, until you decide to either initiate a battle phase, which means I'm going to attack. And you can have as many attack phases as you want on your turn. Or you can just say, I end my turn. Now, if you're going to end your turn, your opponent now has a chance to respond with event cards or champions who have ambush, which means they can play them out of turn. If they choose not to, then your turn just ends. But if they do choose to interrupt your turn with event powers or ambush champions, then you can actually go back into your main action phase and keep casting cards down if you really want to, including having attack phases. If you do get to the end of your turn, no one can play any powers anymore. If you have more than 7 cards, you have to discard back down to 7. And then any damage that your champions took during the turn, that champions that are still in play, they will heal it. Damage does not carry over from round to round. So let me explain a little more about how battle is going to work. I'm just going to use these tokens for an example. So let's say that this was the combat that was taking place. I said, well, I'm going to go ahead and attack. Now, you have a choice. You can either attack with a group of champions, or you can attack with just a single champion. Either way, your opponent has a chance to respond with as many or as few of their blockers as they want. So let's say I just attack with the Pyromancer, who has a combat rating of 5 and a defense rating of 7. Well, if that's the case, my opponent might say, well, even if I combined both the attacks of these two creatures, that's only a total of 6, so there's no way I can kill this Pyromancer, and there's no reason for me to sacrifice both of my creatures for no good whatsoever. So I'm just going to block with my Wolf, and my Wolf will die, which means it's out of the game, but at least the Pyromancer was stopped, and I don't take damage, because any unblocked champion is going to deal damage directly to your life points, and if you go down to 0, you lose the game. Now, the thing is, if I had chosen as the attacking player to attack with both of my creatures together as a group, then my opponent would only have to block with one creature to block them both. He could block with both of them. So, for instance, my Keeper of Secrets is only a 2/3. So if he chose to block with the Demon, or actually let's just say he only blocked with the Demon could kill the Keeper of Secrets because he chooses how his damage is distributed. But blocking one creature is enough to block the entire group, even if they have special powers that make them unblock. If let's say the Pyromancer had a special power that said that she could not be blocked. If the other person in her group, any of the other people in her group are blocked, the entire group is blocked. So the reason you would want to attack with a group normally is only to maximize your damage all at once. And, there's certain circumstances where that's going to be much better than just attacking one-on-one on one. And that's really the core of gameplay. It's very, very simple. Now, a lot of the complexity comes in because of how many different types of cards there are and all their different special abilities. So let me just show you some of those so you can give a taste of what I'm talking about. Let me focus in as best I can here. So here's one of the blue cards. For the blue faction, you have Psionic Assault, Sage Event. Now, anytime you see Sage and things like that, that's just a keyword. Some cards will specifically kick off of certain keywords on cards. Psionic Assault says the target player discards 2 cards at the end of their turn, and it has a symbol synergy, which means if you've played Star Realms, you're kind of familiar with this. And it has the ability Recall. So what that means is that if I was to play I use this card, it goes in my discard pile. If I was to play a blue card at another point, then I would be able to pull this card out of my discard pile and put it back into my hand. Force Mage Apprentice, notice that it costs 0. It has Blitz. Blitz means that as soon as it comes onto the battlefield, I can attack with it or use its power. I can deal. Its power, by the way, is to deal 2 damage to a target, and it has also synergy. If I play a blue card, I can prepare this card. That's actually an important point. Let me talk more about that since I kind of glossed over that. When you attack with a creature, it gets tapped. I should have made that a little more clear. Sorry about that. So when you attack with creatures, it becomes tapped. In order to attack with them again, they need to become prepared. Now, the other thing, too, is that if my opponent chose to block with the creature, it would have to be turned 180 degrees to my opponent to show that it can't be used to block another creature later in the turn. Sorry about that. I just kind of sped through the combat because it wasn't all that complicated. But so that's the benefit of the Force Mage Apprentice, is that she can deal damage and she can potentially keep on going. The Crystal Golem has Ambush, which means that he can be played on your opponent's turn when you are allowed to play events. And he is untargetable, meaning that no effect can target him. Also, it says break this card, draw 2 cards. Break is destroying the card and putting it into your discard pile. Blue Dragon, Airborne, which means that only airborne creatures can block him. Tribute, draw a card and deal 2 damage to a target. Tribute means as soon as you play this card, you do that effect. Then he has a synergy, deal 2 damage to a target if you play a blue card. Burrowing Worm, 18/18, and he has Breakthrough, which means that if he rips through an opponent's defenses, any leftover damage gets dealt to the opponent. The Cave Troll is 0 cost. He keeps coming back. Every time you play a green card, you can pull him out of your discard pile. Fireball, you can either deal 3 damage to a target or pay a coin to deal 3 damage to target player and each champion they control. The Pack Alpha costs 1. It has Blitz, and your other wild champions have +1 combat and +1 defense, and you get to put 2 wolf tokens into play if you use his power by tapping him. I'm sorry, it's not officially tapping, but you know what I mean. The Soul Hunter, when this card is broken, deal 5 damage to target player. That means when he's destroyed. If this card is in your discard pile at the start of your turn, return it to play. Medusa has Ambush and Loyalty 2. Now, anytime you see Loyalty 2, that means that as soon as it comes into play, you can reveal 2 other cards of the same faction to get that special ability, which in this case is breaking a target champion. Zombie Apocalypse, you draw 2 cards, or you break all champions, and then each player puts a zombie token into play for each champion in their discard pile. The Vampire Lord has Ambush and Blitz, and he's unbreakable on your turn. When he deals damage, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on him. Secret Legion, you either draw 2 cards or put 6 human tokens into play. Your human champions gain Blitz this turn. The High King is unbanishable. He has Loyalty 2, Blitz, and you tap him to banish target champion. Angelic Protector, Airborne and Ambush. Her tribute ability, target champion gains unbreakable and untargetable this turn. And another angel, the Avenging Angel, Airborne, Blitz, and Righteous, which means that when she deals damage, you gain that much life. While this card is expended, you cannot be attacked, meaning while she has been tapped, you cannot be attacked by your opponent. And so that's it. I know I sped through a couple things there, but that is essentially Epic. You are just playing cards from your hands, big creatures, and playing events in order to overwhelm your opponent and knock them down to 0 life. And also, the other important thing, if you run out of cards, you win the game. That is the alternate win condition for this game, is you running out of cards. That's why one of the other special abilities in the game is to banish cards, but when cards are banished, they go on the bottom of your deck, so it's not necessarily good for you. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, let me first say that I cannot judge this based on the previous iteration of Epic, because I never played it. I have heard that there are some significant improvements to this system, but I can't speak to that, so I'll just have to gloss over that for the purposes of this review. Also, I've played this game both as just, hey, let's pop open the box, shuffle it up, deal it out, and play, and I've also played with the standard drafting rules in the back of the book. I didn't do like a cube draft or anything like that. So I had these different ways to look at the game, and I'll say that overall it's much better if you do any of the different drafting rules, because it's just a more controlled affair, as opposed to just like randomly getting cards, because you may get totally screwed on having one type of card. Like in the very first game of this I played, the other person got like every type of card draw card that was possible, and I didn't get any, which I lost, and of course sour grapes, whatever, but really card draw is huge in this game, and that's the kind of imbalance that might happen if you don't do a draft. So something to keep in mind. I also only played with one set of the game, so if you play with more than that, you can play with more players and have bigger, more grandiose drafts. I can't really speak to that. Now, thematically, there is no real theme to this game. I mean, at least in Magic, you're supposed to be like planeswalkers summoning creatures and dueling with each other. This one, I guess you're those types of people, like summoners or something like that, but it never really makes that clear, especially since every type of monster and creature is from like all over the multiverse. There's a robot at some point and dinosaurs, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now, having said that, the artwork that depicts all of these crazy creatures and champions is awesome. This game looks fantastic. The actual graphic design of like the borders and the text looks great, very clean, very nice. The rulebook is very straightforward. It is very simple and easy to understand this game in every aspect. So let's talk about that gameplay a bit. I'd said in the beginning this is like a more visceral and faster version of Magic. Well, this game is Magic. I mean, it is so close to Magic that I am astounded that Wizards is letting them get away with this. And I understand that there are a lot of games out there that pick and borrow and choose aspects of Magic the Gathering, and that Magic the Gathering itself picked and chose and borrowed things from other game systems back in the day. But really, I mean, there are so many things that are similar. Some of them, a lot of the abilities are exactly the same. They're just named something different. Flying is Airborne. Righteousness is, lifelink is Righteous or Righteousness. And haste is Blitz. I mean, those are tons of examples of that. There's only a couple of brand new mechanisms that I actually kind of like loyalty, I think, is a very cool thing. And I feel like that may have been in the original Epic, but it feels like a holdover from Star Realms with the loyalty part of the synergy between the different colors of cards. And I did dig that, but I was thinking to myself, Wizards of the Coast sued the game Hex from Cryptozoic, which was on Kickstarter, because they said it was too similar to Magic. I can't fathom how that could be more similar to Magic than Epic is to Magic, and why this game hasn't gotten in trouble, but that's just me. I know that people are going to come down on me for that, like, oh, well, why don't you just play Magic? Why did you ever play this game in the first place? Well, I did think that it would have at least some significant differences, but the core gameplay here is fun. And there is something to be said for being able to get out an 18/18 creature on turn one. You really can. I mean, if you get lucky enough to draw that one worm card, I forget exactly what it's called, that's just one coin, one currency, it takes you to put it out, 18/18, boom. But the problem is, even though that's a main selling point of the game, it is so ridiculously easy to get rid of that creature before it even does anything, that those kind of pluses in the game are really canceled out. That's part of the problem here, is that in this game, it is easy to do whatever you want, to a unfortunate degree, I would say, because it feels like there's no control over anything. It's just like, I do this, boom, done, haha, and then your opponent says, yeah, okay, well, I do this, and boom, all your creatures are gone. Oh, yeah, well, I do this, and oh, I'm out of cards. See, that's an important sticking point of the game. Card draw in this game is all important, end all, be all, everything. In games like Magic the Gathering or any other CCG, LCG, whatever you want to call it, card draw is always important. Totally understand that. But in a game like Magic, I'm just going to have to keep using that as an example, get used to it. You can draw a bunch of cards, but if you can't use them, they're just sitting there, and that's why a hand limit is important. So I might draw, what's that really powerful demon from a recent set? Grizzlebrand. I might draw a Grizzlebrand, but if I can't cast him, he's useless to me, right? In this game, in Epic, you can draw a bunch of cards and immediately use all of them, which sounds fantastic. But if you are one of the players that does not have a lot of things that let you draw cards easily, if you're not constantly milling through your deck, then you are going to be at a severe disadvantage, and the other player can easily destroy you by just being able to put down a bunch of cards and you have no response. You will literally be out of cards, pick a card from your deck and be like, okay, I cast it. Okay, it's not enough to deal with your overwhelming onslaught. Let's move on. Until eventually you have to concede. And that might sound like a specific example, but that type of thing happens more than you would suspect, especially when you're playing a multiplayer game with up to 4 players where one person is going to be totally screwed like that. Now, an interesting part of the game is that you actually win by milling through your deck as quickly as possible as well, which feels like a rich gets richer thing. It's already powerful enough that you can get through your deck as quickly as possible by having a lot of card drawing. Now you can actually win that way as well. So as interesting as that is, I don't know, it's kind of wonky because your deck is very small. And again, everything in this game feels like condensed, faster, smaller, briefer, more streamlined Magic to a fault. It's too simple. It's too easy to do anything. And it feels like it lacks depth for that reason. It lacks strategy. It's just like, put out the craziest card you've got. Doesn't matter what it is, you might as well do it. And it's like, there's no point in saying, well, I don't want to hold back this card, because you may have a card that will destroy it as soon as I put it out. Because that might happen at any point. Doesn't matter. You can't keep track of your opponent's lands to see if they will have the resources available to use it, because they will always have that one coin that they need, and some spells cost zero anyways. And because you refuel on your opponent's turn as well, you are equally vulnerable unless their entire hand is empty of cards, and at that point you're probably decimating your opponent anyways. So what am I trying to say here? It's not a broken game. It works. It's functional. It's very streamlined and fast, and there is some fun to be had. It certainly looks great. It's fun to put out these giant dinosaurs and robots and, dragons and things. But it just felt too straightforward, too simple. It felt like a training wheels version of Magic the Gathering. It feels like a basic version of that. And as much as people might hate me continuing to make that comparison, you can pick whatever CCG you want that has been reliable, has stayed stuck around, and worked very well. You could even say a game like Summoner Wars, or any kind of game where you're taking control of a wizard summoning things. So many other games already do what this game does, but does it with more strategy, more limitations that promote strategy. And I just feel like Epic is too basic and simple. It is simply entry-level card game. I can't even imagine organized play would be that interesting. And again, to even get the most out of this game, you have to be drafting, and you have to be doing the cube draft and all these different things, which require more sets of the cards. And it just feels like I'm not going to deal with that hassle. If I'm going to deal with that much hassle, I'll just buy some Magic starter decks instead. At least that's how I personally felt about it. Maybe your mileage might vary, but for me, Epic from White Wizard Games is a pass. It's just barely okay. Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.